All right, now we get to discuss what it's like being an employee. Not just being an employee, but identifying what you want throughout this process. So as far as being an employee, the employee life, you'll likely spend more time working with your colleagues than doing really anything else, any one thing in your life, at least during your waking hours. And so choosing your career path and choosing the company and the people that you're around is an important choice. It consumes a lot of your life. The other thing to consider as far as is compensation. How much you earn is directly linked to your productivity. And there's a great link below with a short video. Highly recommend going through that. There's some practice questions as well that I'd recommend. And really, the more you make for your employer, the more money that you make for your employer, the more you can get paid. That determines, the first thing that determines how much you get paid in a competitive market is how productive you are. The second thing that determines how much you get paid is the uniqueness of your skill set. So how much of your productivity you capture depends on the uniqueness of your skill set. So you take an assembly line worker, there are assembly line workers that do quite complex things these days in really complex factories, but let's say it's an assembly line worker that's doing something relatively basic that anyone can be trained in say an hour or two, versus someone like LeBron James. Let's say there's two individuals, and they're really, really good at their jobs. They're very, very productive. But the assembly line worker, even if they're really, really good at their job, they can be replaced relatively easily. LeBron James, throughout his basketball career, was a difficult player to replace on teams that he played for. And so if you have a unique skill set, if there's not much competition for your specific skill set, you get to capture more of the value from your productivity. So the productivity sets the ceiling of how much you should be compensated. And the uniqueness of your skill set determines what percentage that you should be, what percentage of that value that you've created that you can actually capture and that you would receive. So the productivity and differentiation are the two drivers. And the good news is that this primarily depends on you. I mean, there's other things that influence your life and provide you opportunities, but productivity and differentiation are two things that are largely, are often under your control. Now, these promotions and negotiating higher salaries, moving to other companies for new jobs, all of these things are highly dependent on you being able to increase your productivity and to increase your differentiation. And the good news is, never stop learning. It's more fun to live life this way, this growth mindset of getting better and better and learning more and more throughout our lives. It's more fun to work this way anyway. And the opposite approach, kind of this 20th century United States labor union paradigm where we kind of all have one job and we do one thing and one thing only, that kind of mentality is something that can hold you back in today's economy. Today's economy rewards constantly increasing your productivity and differentiation and learning more and more and getting better and better over time. Now, what should you do? Well, I recommend this Venn diagram. It's something that I've used when discussing this topic with others for quite a few years now. And so what I recommend is going through these three questions: what do I like, what am I good at, and what can I get paid for? And identifying things in your life and potential directions that you can go and identifying where they go among these circles. So these are my three questions for you. And don't limit yourself. What you're good at could be potentially good at. Likes could be, maybe you don't like some one thing in particular, but there's a general characteristic. And so if I were going through this, I would say, what's something that I like, but I'm not very good at and I can't get paid for it? Well, that's like breakdancing. Or what's something that I'm good at, but I can't get paid for it and I don't really like it? Well, maybe deliberate memorization. And what could I get paid for, but I don't like it and maybe I wouldn't be all that great at it? Maybe investment banking. Let me try and fill out some of the overlap areas. Well, something that I could get paid for and something that I like is woodworking. Unfortunately, I'm terrible at it. Or what could I get paid for that I'm good at, but I don't really like? Well, just doing like raw statistics types of work. For me, that's something I get paid for and I'm good at, but it's not my favorite thing in the world. What's something that I like and that I'm good at, but I can't get paid for? Well, playing strategy games. Like board games, pretty fun. So that leaves me with what in the middle can I get paid for that I'm good at and I like? Now the Venn diagram, that's a critical part of the project for this section. It's quite lengthy, so I recommend sitting down and creating your own Venn diagram. The next subject that we're going to cover is, you'll see an article in the links about the dual income trap, and it describes the situation of this family. And so at this next section, I'll just be discussing some of the specifics in those articles. So if you could stop now and go through those, we will move on. So what you have is, there's this valid question, like, why is this family on the verge of bankruptcy when only one of them has lost their job? It's not both of them. Well, this is something that we'll discuss about the dual income trap. And what I wanted to also point out, if you go through the article, this is something then that we use. We tend to use this kind of loaded language, use these terms like deserve, or we didn't want to bother. And there's these things in our lives that when we're spending a certain amount for a certain lifestyle, cutting back can be very, very difficult, and sometimes in the short term can be even impossible, or nearly impossible in the short term. It creates a lot of difficulties, and it's even for those who are very good within the realm of personal finance, it can be very difficult. So why do you think that's the case? Why is it harder and sometimes impossible in the short term to downgrade a lifestyle than to simply spend less and save more in the first place? Think about that for a minute. Now, one of the primary reasons is we lock into fixed expenses. So we establish a contract to pay a certain amount of rent, and that's what we have to pay. Otherwise, that's just what it is. Or a payment, say, on an auto loan or a mortgage. There's these amounts that we can't, it's very difficult to change them or to get out of them. So what does the dual income trap mean? Well, think about this. Which is more likely? One person to lose their job, or one of two people to lose a job? Well, B is the correct answer, because there's two opportunities to potentially lose a job. And so say that there's a dual income family, and one of them loses their jobs, but with just one of those jobs, they can't meet their expenses. So it's like, well, just find a new job. Well, it can be difficult to find a job, but it's even harder to find a job when you're locked into a region. You can't really move because one of you has a job there where you live. And so if the other person finds a job, say 200 miles away, that creates difficulty, that creates conflict. And so say you're trying to find a job in the same area, it creates this region lock and makes it more difficult to find a job. So the dual income trap is to lock in high fixed expenses on two incomes, but then potentially having one of you lose a job and then not being able to meet the high fixed expenses. And so what is the solution to this? Well, dual income can work fine as long as there are high savings rates and low fixed expenses. Then you're not in the trap. If something bad were to occur, if one of you loses a job, it's not the end of the world. You'll do fine. One way of describing this is, say there are similar levels of risk for two different situations. Now, this is just a hypothetical, but imagine there's one that's single income, either because you're single or only one person, say in a partnership, is working. You make $50,000, you spend $40,000, and you're saving $10,000 a year, let's say. Or dual income, maybe they're making $40,000 plus $30,000 a year, but they're spending $45,000 and saving $25,000. One could argue that these are kind of similar levels of risk. The single income might be more flexible, might be able to find a job more easily, and is less likely to experience job loss than one of the two people in the dual income household. The other thing to remember with dual income, it's often harder to save money on dual income because it takes coordination and discipline. And that's when you need both parties really participating, taking the time and the structuring to actually become savvy within personal finance and to really align your personal finance behaviors with the long-term goals of the family.